This is Chapter 2 for Clive Bernard and Clementine, A World Beyond the Dryer. Through the Portal. We are doing Chapter 2, called Deep in the Forest. Clive and Bernard came upon a break in the path that met the river. The tall trees had started to thin at the river's edge, revealing clear blue water moving downstream to the south. There were a few tall, broken tree trunks laying across the river from bank to bank. They looked safe enough to cross. This feels like some real ninja training. It's all balance or die, laughed Clive, as he mimicked what he felt was his best impression of a ninja, then proceeded to start balancing as he started crossing the tree trunks with a hop and a jump. Bernard laughed wholeheartedly and pulled himself up onto the nearest tree trunk with a bit more caution, looking just a bit over the edge and down into the river. When they reached the other side of the riverbank, Clive was feeling musical and started dancing as he walked and sang the song Come As You Are from Nirvana to himself. When he got to the guitar solo, he threw himself into his air guitar. Bernard smiled as he saw this, and the two of them shared a great smile. The trees were starting to thicken as they found a new path barely visible along the darkening ground, which meant it was crossing into the evening. The path, which was governed by the twists and turns of the surrounding trees, made looking behind you harder to see where you had come from. Further down the trail, they heard what they thought was a small group of children fighting and laughing. The two men kept walking, and then they saw them. They were kind of childish in appearance, but also looked like they could be men, just not tall men, dwarves maybe. But Bernard had only read about dwarves in The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings. Never actually seeing any in real life, he decided to just ask them, "Excuse me, are you dwarves?" Bernard blurted nervously, holding his hands together, fidgeting. "For your information, tall one, I'm Mirklo, and this is my cousin Nalin. We are of dwarven origin. Nice to meet you guys, and you are?" the dwarf called. Mirklo responded in a deep voice, looking expectantly up at Bernard. Clive smiled at him and said, "I'm Clive, and Bernard is my friend. We are looking for my friend's girlfriend, Clementine. Have you seen a man with a duffel bag anywhere?" Mirklo looked from Bernard to Clive, then back at Nalin. "What do you reckon is a duffel bag?" Mirklo asked in confusion as he looked again at Nalin. "Well, you get it must be a bag of some sort," Nalin said, giving his brown-haired cousin a bit of a shove and a smile. Nalin was also brown-haired, and both men had beards. A few braids with some metal beads were woven into Mirklo's shoulder-length hair, and Nalin had a leather strap holding his hair back, which was shaved on both sides. Both of the dwarves were wearing modest 14th-century traveler clothing, along with brown leather boots and cloaks, each carrying a sword at their hip. "Silence the flowers! Turn down the forest breath!" shouted a dark-skinned man in green traveling clothes with green hair and yellow eyes. He was wildly waving his arms in the air as he ran past Clive and Bernard next to the dwarves. "What did he say, Bee? How do you silence flowers? I didn't know they made noise," Clive asked, scratching his head where his long, stringy, shoulder-length blonde hair was swinging in the breeze. "I don't know, dude. That's seriously against the Tree Huggers Union, don't you think?" Bernard responded nervously. Well, the dwarves stared at them with their strange language. "What's a tree hugger, do you suppose, Mirklo?" Nalin said, while shaking his head, wondering why anyone would hug a tree. "Do they actually hug trees there, where you come from? Are you under a witch's spell?" Mirklo asked curiously towards Clive, shifting his weight from foot to foot. Nalin was ready to run for it and quickly said, "I think I left my horse unattended, and it's almost breakfast. Me mom's gonna get worried." Mirklo grabbed a hold of the back of Nalin's cloak and started off down the trail the way that they had come and disappeared. "This place is strange and creepy," Clive laughed and said softly, "Silence, flowers," while swinging side to side, laughing. That guy must have been eating some of my adopted dad's special brownies. He made it to calm down my adopted mother's during one of her episodes. Bernard laughed, while Clive used his air quotes, referencing his adopted mother's big mood swings during her period. A few hours later, back in the castle grounds. "I got a bad feeling about this," Clementine said to herself, thinking about Han Solo, feeling like she was stuck out in some space land. She laughed and almost cried a little while getting herself off of the ground where she had been smoking her pipe. Clementine knew she wasn't going to be able to run for it. The guards who gave her the pipe tobacco were watching, especially close now that she was getting up. The red-haired man said, "Time for you to meet your highness." He motioned for Clementine to follow him and said, "This way, mistress." Following the red-haired man, Clementine paused momentarily, turning to give the black-haired guard his pipe back. The castle gardens were parted by a long cobblestone walkway lined with trees, with white flowers on them and white jasmine gardenias, leading to special gardens behind the lush green hedge on either side. One was a place for holding parties outside, and the other was a maze. Each in the center had a special fountain with white-encrusted jewels. Castle Dove, First Kingdom. Upon entering, a huge wooden door was opened for her as Clementine followed behind the Queen's Guard that she was with. Clementine was led up a winding stone staircase to the second floor of the living quarters. Each floor had a window that you could see out to the garden below. When they reached the 8th door on the right, she noticed that the same white jewels from the fountain were decorated within the courtyard. Clementine thought curiously as to why the white jewels were everywhere. The hallway was cold and dark, with a few torches that hung from various walls as they went along. It smelled like fire and earth and the smell of evening flowers and cold breeze from outside the windows. The red-haired guard stopped in front of one of the doors with a tapestry hanging on it, of blue and gray. A tree with large branches had been embroidered on the large tapestry, and in the center sat a broken white jewel. Clementine thought that it must have been broken in half, and as she got closer, she saw that it had a shimmer to it. The red-haired guard reached out and opened the door, leading Clementine inside to reveal a woman lying on a grand four-poster bed, with a white blanket over her, with white curtains that hung on either side. She could see that each curtain was held back with a wooden hook that had a dove carved into it. There was a light wooden chair sitting by the bed, where the red-haired guard motioned for Clementine to sit. As Clementine sat down, she noticed that the woman on the bed next to her had opened her eyes. She was staring straight into Clementine's blue eyes. The woman started to sit up, moving a bit closer to Clementine. "You look just like my sister who died," the woman said, a little unsettled, turning her gaze to the red-haired guard. Looking into his brown eyes, she said, "Why would you bring her to me? Who is this?" She went silent for a moment and looked back at Clementine. I thought she... Why did you bring her to me?" Clementine just stared at her as the woman became more hysterical, wondering what to make of the situation. The red-haired guard opened his mouth to speak and bowed slightly to the lady, saying, "My queen." As soon as Clementine heard this, she burst out and said, "You're a queen? Where am I? In Camelot?" Clementine was unbelieving as she began to giggle. "What? Next you're going to say that there's some prophecy, and you're going to tell me I have to bring a ring to Mordor," Clementine said thickly with sarcasm. The queen looked at her strangely and replied, "What is Camelot, and what is Mordor?" Clementine shook her head while closing her eyes for a split second and responded with, Never mind. The red-haired guard said, "My queen, if I may." The queen sighed in annoyance. "Fine, if you must." The red-haired guard started again. "There's something I never told you. When you gave birth to your daughter, you gave birth to another, but you had passed out from loss of blood, and only remember the birth of one. Your husband had recently died, being murdered, as well as losing your older sister to the fever." The queen looked shocked, but the red-haired guard continued to talk. "The part that you well know was that your daughter has been betrothed to the Second Kingdom's King Bartolo's son, Morpheus." Clementine looked horrified. "You mean to say that the Matrix is real? Is Morpheus real?" she practically shouted. The queen looked horrified at the guard and exclaimed, "Regulus, the girl is speaking in tongues. She must have fallen ill. What is the meaning of this?" Regulus started once more as the room settled down. "She's not ill, my queen. She has been living in the other realm ever since you told me to take her away, in a city called New York, and is speaking of stories untold of our people." "And what of the other child?" the queen asked, annoyed. Clementine and the queen braced themselves, awaiting Regulus's answer. Regulus felt nervous and stammered the next few words. You see, "Out with it," she shouted. Clementine swore she saw an object such as a brush move in fear of her voice. The child is a boy. His name is Clive." The next morning came and went, with noon having brought lunch for Clementine, who had taken her tray of buns, cheese, and meat with soup, with clear broth, onto the terrace off of the bedroom she had been given use of. The room was just down the hall from her mother, with crisp white and wooden armchairs by a beautiful fireplace just like the room of her mother. There was also the same four-poster bed with white curtains held back by carved doves. It was such a lovely place to be eating lunch in a beautiful castle, with the sun coming just over the left side of the terrace, leaving shadows from the plants on the top of the ledges. Clementine was having a hard time reconciling herself to the thought that she had a brother, when she had always been an only child, let alone a twin. She wished that she could see Bernard and tell him all the funny things that had happened and kiss him. She wondered if he even knew that she had been taken. With another bite of bun and cheese and a sip from her tea, Clementine thought she might even like to see Clive. Meanwhile, in another kingdom, next to a beautiful clear lake, with the sun shining brightly on it, a tall blonde knight dressed in divine iron-plated armor that had the raven crest on it jumped off of his horse and pulled his black glove off. Kneeling on the dirt road, he pressed his hand along the ground and closed his warm brown eyes. What are you doing?" asked a handsome man with long flowing brown hair, who was dressed in gray prince attire with black jeweled pin of a raven. He was laying in the grass, propped up on one arm, looking lazily at his personal nightly king's guard. "Prince Morpheus, as I told you this morning, we are out investigating the two strange men that a few people have reported as suspicious characters. Sire, be thankful your father, King Bartolo of the Second Kingdom to Raven, has allowed you to gallivant around on this excursion. As you well know, he would deem this work servant work, and wouldn't want his precious only son to be doing something dangerous," Morpheus's guard explained, as he opened his brown eyes to look at the young prince. "I order you not to tell my father what we are actually doing. As far as he knows, we are doing the perimeter training check that you supposedly are trying to teach me, and I don't think my father's ways are very modern." "We haven't been at war for at least 2 centuries, Morpheus said with an all-knowing tone. "Besides, Artie, this is the first exciting news we've heard in about 3 months. The king's guard stood up and looked down at Prince Morpheus, and said with a strong authority, "I asked you to stop calling me that. My name is Sir Arturo of the Fifth Order, King's Class of the Raven Brigade. You are to address me," he said loudly, as he placed his ungloved hand on his chest. "It's Sir Arturo if you must say something formal. Say, guard, but nothing further," he said very clearly. Morpheus had been mouthing along every word of the Knight's Guard speech, as he had heard this many times before. "Anyways, Artie, let's get back to business, meaning you," Morpheus said, completely unfazed as he played with the grass. Sir Arturo glared down at his prince and grumbled very loudly, then got back down on his hands and knees, once again tracking the two mysterious sets of tracks down in the dirt. "Those two dwarves that came to the castle a few days ago, speaking of two men wearing unusual clothes and speaking in a strange language that almost resembles our own. They talked in code where they never said each other's names," Morpheus continued, "using words such as dude and only referring to one another with a single letter, which can only assume is the first letter of their name." Sir Arturo jumped to his feet and made his way to his horse. "Come here, Slavia, my gorgeous black horse. You're such a beautiful lady. If you were a human such as I'd marry you right now, Arturo said, nuzzling his black horse. Slavia nuzzled Sir Arturo as he spoke this to her. Prince Morpheus just shook his head as he saw this. Dusting himself off, he stood up and lazily walked over to his own shiny black horse. Morpheus mounted his horse and said, "You are a glorious horse, Orion. You have never failed me," Prince Morpheus said to his horse, gesturing to Sir Arturo to lead them onward in pursuit of these strange fellows. A few hours later, Prince Morpheus and Sir Arturo arrived at the spot that the dwarfs had described as the sighting of the strange men. There wasn't any sight of them, and the trail was winding them deeper into the forest. It was starting to get dark, so Sir Arturo turned towards Prince Morpheus and said, "Sire, it is not safe on the road for you. We must head back home now." These were not the words that Prince Morpheus was expecting to hear. He looked at Sir Arturo with a furrowed brow and said in protest, "Artie, come on. These are not the words of adventure. Besides, we still haven't found the men we are looking for. I also know that if we go back to the castle, that my future bride will be arriving there soon, and I am not ready to be that grown up yet. Please." Prince Morpheus pleaded with his most convincing look. Sir Arturo, sitting upon his horse, looked sympathetically at his prince and said, "Oh, all right. But let's keep riding until we find an inn. You are the son of the king, and you cannot just sleep on the side of the road ready for marauders. I do wish also to find out why two dwarfs were so very far from their own kingdom." After this, Arturo whispered to Slavia, and off they went. About 20 minutes later, there was a small village that had a suitable inn that Sir Arturo deemed acceptable for the prince to stay in, and a small but spacious stable. After the horses were looked after, the two of them went inside. The inn was made of stone and wood, with whitewashed stones that made it comfortable by the fire. Inside, there was a small kitchen in the back, and a number of wooden tables for guests to eat at or play games on before going up to their rooms. There was also a small bar where drinks were being served, where a tall man stood polishing glasses and pouring drinks. After Sir Arturo checked the two of them in, they sat down at one of the tables by the fireplace to wait for the server to get a meal. A tall, willowy woman with brown hair walked up to them and said, "What can I get the two of you?" "Oh my, you're him, aren't you? You are Prince Morpheus," she said, and in awe that the prince was at the inn. She had not seen a royal in person, which was probably the case for everyone that was in the inn. Prince Morpheus laughed at this, and said in his kindest voice, "Fair maiden, thank you for your kindness. Do not fret. We are just looking to have good food and drink. You don't have to make a fuss. What do you recommend here in this fine establishment?" Sir Arturo watched as a server woman swooned over Prince Morpheus and his bright smile. The woman composed herself, then said, trying to sound normal, "Oh, yes, you've come to the right place. This is a place known for the deer burger and potatoes, with the finest ale you could ever drink." Prince Morpheus was amused by this, as he responded with, "Well, it's settled. That is what I shall have. I'm not sure about what my man here will be having, but you can count me in on all you've described." Sir Arturo looked at Prince Morpheus and sighed, but chuckled softly and said, "Do you have any other specials, such as chicken or soup?" The server lady looked at him thoughtfully, trying to remember what the soup of the day was, and then she suddenly remembered and said, "The soup we have is a barley rabbit soup with buns and potatoes." Sir Arturo heard this and nodded, then said, "Yes, that will be quite nice. I'll have some wine with it if you have any." He asked this, and the woman nodded, then bowed slightly to the prince, walking away to the kitchen with excitement. After she left, Prince Morpheus looked around and at the other guests and were chatting. Prince Morpheus looked around, and the other guests were chatting and looking at him and his knightly protector, Sir Arturo, trying not to stare. Prince Morpheus stood up and said, "I hope you all have a wonderful dinner, as we are hoping to enjoy." This was met with applause. Then the server woman came back with their drinks. Prince Morpheus told her to bring each guest a drink that he would pay for to treat the fair people. She blushed and did so, which made everyone cheer with admiration for the prince. The two of them could hear murmurs here and there of how wonderful they thought the Prince Morpheus was. It wasn't long of a wait to be served their food, and they ate it up and thanked the server, saying, "You were absolutely right. This was the best meal I have ever had, and my first time ever eating at an inn. Thank the chef. Well done. Good night, all. We must retire for the evening," Prince Morpheus said, this just addressing the server woman, but the rest of the guests as well, being a rather appreciative guest. Then they went upstairs to their rooms for the night. That is the end of chapter 2.